Hey guys, welcome to the Wild Witch Show. I'm Meghna,
And I'm Upamanyu.
and we've got a great show planned for you. Now, you're obviously wondering what the headline topic is: Pablo Escobar's cocaine hippos. So, Pablo Escobar, the drug hero or the drug villain, was someone who actually smuggled cocaine through hippos and brought them to Colombia. And now Colombia is ridden with too many hippos, and they have plans to cull up to 80 hippos. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about how in Nepal is just the opposite, where people are learning to live with rhinos as the numbers are soaring. So two big animals, the hippos and the rhinos, but one where coexistence is happening and the other where culling is happening. Apart from that, we'll also be talking about I'll be talking about some other small stories as well as Oops would be talking about some stories. What are the other stories we have?
There is an interesting one where we have covered similar things before as well, where Chernobyl's remains and the sort of in that space, the no go zone for humans. That's where the wildlife is thriving. We will sort of discuss that and discuss um, you know the pros and cons of such an environment and how hostile it can be for these animals. And then there's another story from the UK where there it's headline like of almost 15 million oysters are planned to be released in the North Sea for a rewilding project. So again, similar to what we talked about last week, certain rewilding and captive breeding and those topics as well. If anyone remembers what we talked about last week, but yeah, as Meghna said, there are some shorter stories as well, and some interesting species discoveries here and there as well.
Okay, so the headline topic: Colombia to cull up to 80 hippos descended from Pablo Escobar Zoo. This is an article from Guardian. It says Colombia has authorized a plan to cull up to 80 hippos descended from those illegally imported by drug lord Pablo Escobar in the 1980s. The growing population, now numbering around 170 and spread far from their original habitat, poses a significant threat to native species and local villagers. Environment Minister Irene Velez stated that previous attempts at population control, including sterilization and relocation, have proven too expensive and ineffective. This decision marks a drastic measure to preserve Colombia's ecosystem and ensure public safety, as the country is the only one outside Africa with a wild hippo population. Having said this, oops, I remember I read this article somewhere where after the hippos were introduced, they were able to reestablish themselves because they actually belonged to this area long, long, long back. So there was a niche or a void for them that they were able to fill again. So, but here it says that they're invasive, but I remember that was the only reason, or that was why they were able to thrive. And then, there was a lot of scientific journals and scientific papers also written about this.
Yeah, I think that I read something similar, but it's interesting how for different reasons wildlife is displaced. Sometimes it's for the conservation reasons, but sometimes it's for certain nefarious reasons, which is the case here. The hippo you know drug smuggling through hippos. That's quite interesting. Now, again, these it's a it's a dilemma in my mind where I don't want these hippos to be culled, I don't know if there's any way to set up sanctuaries for them, because these hippos are not inherently bad just because they carried cocaine, right? These hippos are not anyway in any shape or form. I don't know. I don't think they're diseased in any way or they're threat in any way. Um, the ethical management question does come into play. Is there zoos across the Latin America and America, North America, that these hippos could be transferred to, maybe back to Africa? I don't know. Is that even possible?
I honestly don't know, but obviously, there is a, I mean, people do come to Colombia to see these hippos. So there are like hippo tours and hippo souvenirs and hippo different things that are being sold. And Pablo actually got them to keep them in a zoo. I mean, at least that's what he wanted to show, right? Like that he is building the zoo and there's this big ranch for hippos, so he could cover the entire drug smuggling that he was doing through the hippos.
Hmm.
And the hippos are actually one of the main attractions at the Napoles Ranch as well, which was confiscated by the Colombia's government when it seized Escobar's property. It is
Hmm.
a theme park and it has swimming pools and water slides and a zoo. And that zoo actually includes several other African species. But I think the main thing that has happened with the hippos here is that the hippos are now free roaming and they're
Hmm.
in the other rivers, they're not in a zoo. So they have grown. But I feel like any animal that thrives in a different environment probably sometimes survived in that environment, or is some animal that can adapt to that environment. But in the hippos, I remember reading that there was a niche or a void that it was trying to fulfill. So like culling almost 80 out of the 170 is like culling half of the population. I understand that the government has tried neutering, it has tried relocation, it has tried things, but there must be a better way of coexistence than just culling them.
Yeah, it is a difficult one, as we know, and these kinds of things is a difficult decision for the government to take as well, as I'm sure everyone listening to this show is also aware. Now, what the government ultimately does will be their decision, obviously, but what we can say here is that, as Meghna said, there must be a better way. I don't know where these does the article mention at all where these hippos were sourced from? Were they sourced from Africa or like different zoos in the US? I don't actually know the full story there.
I don't know. It doesn't say where it was sourced from. It just says that it was brought to the country by Pablo in 1980s. But
Mm.
it does say one of the points that you picked up earlier. How you were saying that they can be returned back to Africa. So it says Colombia's hippos come from a limited gene pool. Obviously, the hippos that were introduced back in the 1980s and now have grown. So they could carry diseases that the African counterparts do not have. So taking them back to the natural habitat is unfeasible because that might mean spreading a plethora of diseases and a new fresh hell for the African hippos, which is why they need to
Mm.
be here. But at the same time, there has to be a better way of handling the situation than culling them, because they're healthy creatures. They're just trying to survive there. They have survived and they've adapted. That is why they've grown. So either like a big national park for them, or something else which can be cordoned off, where the hippos can stay and grow.
Yeah, I think that would be the better idea there. I do think that I also do agree with you. Like there could be a better way. There are zoos across the world, which I'm sure will be some of those zoos will be more than happy to house these hippos, etc. But I don't know. Sanctuaries can be set up. Does the article also, sorry, I'll ask, does the article say anything about like why these hippos are being killed? Like why is it a problem right now?
Yeah, they're saying that one, obviously, threat for the people, and
Hmm.
two, it is also in competition with river manatees. So
Ah, right.
yeah, so there's like a problem of the invasive versus native theory, and secondly, that it's not safe for the people that are living there.
Yeah, I think those are really difficult challenges to um, navigate. I would say, at least those are very difficult challenges to navigate. Hopefully, the government will take the right decision, and by the right decision, we mean that it's a win-win situation for both the hippos and the humans living there. But I don't know. For me, nothing comes to mind immediately that this would be a good solution. We can only say that I can only say that this is not the right solution. That I can definitely say. But what would be a right solution? I am not sure at
Yeah,
this point.
I honestly think there has to be a better solution because we have another story where coexistence is happening. But
Hmm.
obviously, I think that is also the narrative of invasive versus native. But there is like a side story in The Guardian that I was just reading. So it says
Hmm.
Escobar spent part of his vast fortune assembling a menagerie of exotic animals, including elephants, giraffes, zebras, ostriches, and kangaroos at his hacienda outside Doradal, a town about 10 miles west of the Magdalena. After he was shot dead in Medellin by Colombian police in 1993, local people poured onto the property and tore apart Escobar's villa in search of rumored caches of money and weapons. Afterward, the hacienda sank into ruin. In 98, the government seized the property and eventually transferred most of the animals to domestic zoos. But several hippos,
Hmm.
most sources say three females and one male, were considered too dangerous to be moved, and that's how Colombia's current trouble began. The hippos multiplied, and once they reach maturity, female hippos can produce a calf every 18 months, and they can give birth 25 times during a lifespan of 40 to
Wow.
50 years. Yeah. And there was one dominant male, so it is basically that one dominant male and his gene pool that is being passed down now.
Wow. Wow. This is yeah. I think also this lacked the management, as is with all things we do, but it lacked the foresight and management when these hippos escaped, right? At
Yep.
that point, yeah, something could have been done. Maybe it could have been neutered or something like that before they multiplied, right? And now there might be multiple males from those offsprings and things like that. But yeah,
Yeah. And I
it's a
think the thing with hippos is also that because their bite force is so crazy, like if you've ever seen those videos, like you can put a watermelon in a hippo's mouth and it can just just close a jaw lightly and break the watermelon. So or if you've seen those videos of a hippo actually just holding an alligator or crocodile in its mouth and violently throwing it away. So, like hippos
mm,
are actually animals that you might think are slow, that stay in rivers, that are fat, but they are crazy strong. Like,
yeah.
and their jaws are something you need to be away from.
Mm, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I they have one of the strongest bite forces per square inch, in the animal kingdom. It's crazy how much bite force they have. And one of the most dangerous animals as well, causes the highest number of human deaths per year, hippos. So they're very dangerous to humans as well. I mean, they are herbivorous animals, so they are very shy, and they get startled easily. And when wild animals are startled, they have to defend themselves. So that's how hippos defend themselves. So again, the public safety angle cannot be overlooked, but at the same time, I think the I guess welfare of the hippos should also be taken into account before any sweeping decision is made.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if they really wanted to, or they thought that it was really dangerous to move more hippos, they should have just moved the male if they did not want, the hippos to multiply, because there were three females and one male.
Yeah.
So that would have been the best way, or they should have found a way to probably at least separate them. Because now,
Mm.
if they're saying that, oh, we killed Pablo, and then the thing went out of control, the hippos did not ask to be there. The hippos were just brought there, and then they've multiplied because they found a nutrient-rich environment that was great for their survival. But now that the hippos have grown, that doesn't mean that we get to decide that they shouldn't stay there just because we did not decide in the first place how to control them,
Yeah.
when you had the option to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, ethical management of these kinds of invasive species, and we talk about invasive species on every episode. There's some topic or the other, and I think last week we also talked about that. So I think it's a tricky to maintain that balance and have that win-win situation, but hopefully we'll keep an eye on the story and see how it goes. But as it looks right now, I think Colombia is very dead set on getting rid of these hippos. um, so yeah, if anyone and from the conservation slash research community is watching this video and they have some innovative solutions, you guys can sort of definitely comment or share this video with the authorities along with your solution and things like that. But yeah, it would be interesting to see what ends up happening.
Yeah,
Mm.
that is true. Okay.
um cool. If we go on to the next one, this is again, I would say, conservation and the aftermath of war or certain devastating events. So this is from a story from the Guardian again, the no go zone paradox. Chernobyl's wildlife thrives amid pro nuclear shift. So this article reads, 40 years after Chernobyl disaster, the exclusion zone harbors thriving wildlife with wolf populations 7 times higher than pre disaster levels. Despite ongoing contamination from cesium 137 and other radioactive materials, experts suggest nature's resilience might be greater than if humans had remained. This paradox emerges amidst renewed global discussions on nuclear power, fueled by energy crisis and geopolitical conflicts impacting Ukraine, including threats to Chernobyl plant itself. The 1986 accident released immense radioactivity, contributing to the Soviet Union's collapse, and the site continues to require significant attention, as seen with recent drone damage to its containment structure, highlighting the lingering dangers and complex legacy of catastrophe. So again, this is we discussed about this a lot when we were scripting for this. I think there's a sentiment that the pro nuclear shift, like, yes, the geopolitical geopolitical unrest and sort of the conflicts that are going on in those regions are actually putting a strain on the global energy ecosystem, but the global energy cycle rather. But nuclear energy, while it is very clean and it is very efficient, is also very volatile in its by its very nature. So we must really think hard before we commit to anything long term and sort of invest heavily in the nuclear space.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with anything that's that potent. Like, I mean, if something's that clean, as an energy, obviously it is also that dangerous, because that's the pros and cons of of a nuclear plant. The surprising part, though, is that those radiation levels um, are something that are disastrous for humans. Like, they're too much for humans, but for the animals, somehow the resilience grows. As soon as you remove humans from a place, they're like, I don't care if I'm being blasted by um, radioactive materials. I will survive and I will thrive and I will multiply, because the only problem I had were humans, not the radioactive materials.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just sharing some photographs from the article. So this is a wolf looks into the camera in the abandoned village of Orevichi, Belarus. Wolf populations are 7 times higher than they were before the Chernobyl disaster. And this is a beautiful photograph, camera trap photograph as well. So that's one. We talked about Wolski's horses last week. Here it appears again. So these are wild Przewalski's horses graze in a forest inside Chornobyl exclusion zone, Ukraine. This is a second photograph. This is another one from Japan. A dog stretches in the deserted town of Futaba inside the 20-kilometer evacuation zone in Fukushima, Japan. This is where the Japan nuclear plant disaster happened. Here we can see some vultures. So, Cineris vultures near the demilitarized zone in Gangwon province, South Korea. There is another nuclear tragedy that happened there in South Korea. This is just a photograph of an abandoned amusement park. See how nature reclaims the space. That is to see. This used to be a completely cleared area. I would imagine if it were amusement park, but now it's completely reclaimed by nature, and increasingly it will be again. So yeah, these photographs sort of remind us that how resilient animals and nature can be in general.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, and I think we don't give that much credit. It's actually, and I think we've spoken about this earlier. Oops, that those videos that come up in YouTube itself, where they say,
Mm,
"What if humans disappeared this second?" And then the videos like start from humans just walking on the road, and then they just disappear, and then they talk about what happens after that. So they obviously talk about how the unmanned nuclear facilities then start going haywire, and they talk about how pets struggle at home. But then they talk about how after the aftermath, after like everything subsides and the nuclear effects and everything has subsided, the animals and plants actually take over everything that was human. So like all the buildings, all the spaces, and then they thrive and they survive. So it tells us that nature is resilient if we give them the opportunity to. The only thing is we don't give them the opportunity. We just keep deforesting, we keep plunging, we keep fishing, like the industrial trawling and everything, so we take more than we give. So if we actually have a balance, nature would thrive amazingly well. And if nature thrives well, we would have a chance at protecting this planet for way longer than what it's predicted. I mean, right now, according to, I think, Attenborough, it's 80 or 2080 or 90 where
mm,
we come to an end.
mm. Yeah, it's a dire situation there, you know, to say the least. And yeah, I think we can definitely do this, like in terms of like giving them the space while we are there, giving them the space. But also I think these kinds of technologies, I think that's a more potent point here, is that you know just because the wildlife are thriving there, that does not mean we should be playing with these kinds of very volatile technologies, there should be some level of concern there, as is warranted. But I think this feature story also highlights the resilience of nature, and if given the space, like you remember during COVID times, all the ships were, um, you know, stopped, all the shipping stopped, and it was like everyone, the wildlife, the marine wildlife was thriving. Even now, um I think I was reading an account of a fisherman in the Strait of Hormuz, where all the fishermen now, they're saying that they are seeing fish that they haven't seen there in like 18 years or 20 years. The wildlife there, the marine wildlife there is thriving like anything, because there is no ships. There's that loud sounds, those huge sort of ships, the ultra big, ultra wide ships that they produce, those are not there. So the wildlife, the marine habitats are thriving.
Yeah, and I think that's the case with every place. Like if you give it time to, recover, it would be crazy good for the environment. And then if it's good for the environment, then eventually it's good for us. And I think this Oops and me have spoken about this earlier as well. Like there are areas where you protected marine protected areas. They've created these areas, these zones, and it's a no fishing zone. And then over the course of a few years or a few decades, because there is no disturbance there, the fish actually multiply without any disturbance, and then there is so many fish that they spill over into
Mm,
the non-protected areas. And
yes.
then the fishermen report how like the protected areas are actually helping their fishing. So
Yeah.
that's what we need to do. Like, so if there are areas like Chernobyl, there are areas where you can protect or you can let nature thrive. I think even if it is by mistake, or even if it is because of something that we've done, or something else, but I think we need to start creating more and more spaces for wildlife. We have enough spaces for humans now, but we need more spaces for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. The Chernobyl disaster obviously was a tragedy for the people living there, but as highlighted by this article, the wildlife is thriving there, and that's the case with all of those spaces where there are mines or demilitarized zones, or like radioactive areas and things like that. But yeah, let's hope that we are able to give wildlife and nature more chance. We obviously um, want to be also like keeping in mind the human side of things as well. But I think even with the human population and things like that, there is, if we let go of our expanded dreams and all the time, encroaching on the lands of the animals, we can actually strike that balance, I believe.
Absolutely. I think it is just a matter of need and greed. And,
Mm,
there are people and tribals and people in small remote places actually living on very little and being very happy. So I think we all need to learn from that and actually let go of our greed and start living in, like, in lesser resources, with lesser resources, and give more back to nature.
yeah, yeah. Cool. That's all we had to say about that. Very interesting piece of article. But what do we have next, Meghna?
Yeah, the next topic obviously is the counter topic of the hippos in Colombia. It's the rhinos in Nepal. So it's an
Mm,
article from Guardian. It says they come right past the house in quotes, single quotes, learning to live with rhinos as numbers soar in Nepal. Nepal is experiencing a rise in human wildlife conflict due to growing populations of megafauna like rhinos and tigers. Near Chitwan National Park, a recent incident saw wild Indian rhinoceros wander into a village and a hotel, requiring intervention from staff to guide it away safely. This highlights the increasing need for coexistence strategies. To address this, initiatives like a 7-day workshop led by Doma Podel, founder of the Wildlife Victim Fund and a survivor of a rhino attack herself, are training environmentalists. These trainees will then educate local communities on how to interact more safely with these large animals, aiming to reduce conflict and promote harmonious living. Um, so, there are two different stories. Obviously, with the hippos, I think they think of the hippos as outsiders, so they're not looking to coexist with them. They rather kill them than coexist. But here in
Mm.
Nepal, they understand that okay, rhinos are important. They belong in the national park, but they might be straying outside. And I mean, kudos to someone like Doma Patel. There's someone
Mm.
also called Mike Coots that I follow, who are victim of an attack. So she is a survivor of a rhino attack, and now she's training the environmentalist, which means that her passion for the animal must be so huge. So even though she was attacked, she wants that there should be coexistence, which is crazy amazing. I mean, I think I have special respect for such humans who, after going through something as traumatic, will actually stand up for the animals. Similar with Mike Coots, I think he was a surfer and he lost his leg to a shark attack, and now he is a shark. What would you call it? A shark
Advocate.
advocate. Yes, he's a shark advocate. So he actively keeps filming great whites and other sharks and talking about how sharks are important. And you can see a lot of his videos with just like one metallic leg. So kudos to something, like an initiative like this, and the fact that everyone wants to coexist with rhinos there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I think the point highlighted in our discussion question around education and training. This is the gap. Sorry, this is the bridge that can act as the glue between the wildlife and the humans. There is going to be, as we discussed last week as well, like with the lines blurring and you know the urban spaces getting more and more into the wild spaces, urban spaces encroaching on the wild spaces. With that happening in real time as we speak, there obviously the lines between the urban and the wild is blurring. So there will be more and more of these encounters if we don't reverse that encroachment part. So I think education there is will be very important going forward as well, and getting to know the animal, getting to know its behavior. Generally, wild animals do not attack unprovoked, but there's a learning to be done. I think both parts, on our part and the animal's part. So we can start with ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think I'm going to just share the photos from this because
Mm.
it's a really, really, really interesting article. And Doma, who is a survivor of the rhinoceros attack, she actually lost her mom to a rhino attack.
Wow.
So yeah, and despite that, she's actually uh, advocating for the rhinos, which is, I think, I mean, honestly, we will try to get her onto the episode if we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, strong women like her. Oh, wow. So this is actually the rhino that had entered the hotel complex, and this is the manager showing light, a strobe of light, so that it goes in the opposite direction, and that's what happened. The rhino did become a local sensation because everyone like clicked pictures of it, but then it went back. But this was just one of the growing cases of rhinos venturing into human settlements,
Mm.
obviously because of the spillover and how human settlements are very close to the national parks. This is Doma Patel, and this is her. She is Nepal's first female trail guide and founder of the Wildlife Victim Fund. And it says in 2004, she lost her mom to a rhinoceros attack. And this is her 7-day immersive workshop where she's helping environmentalists develop strategies on how to respond during encounters with wildlife. And this is, course participants are using role play to simulate encounters, and also teaching school children and women in villages how to respond. The amazing part also is that Doma Patel actually stayed near Chitwan. So she grew up in a small village, and her parents used to tell her to climb up trees to observe the animals such as rhinos, tigers, and bears. But once, while cutting grass in a community forest, a leopard actually jumped right above her head, which is crazy. Like, to have those kind of encounters. And women usually do the bulk of the gathering of firewood, wild herbs, and animal fodder in Nepal. So, which is why the initiative is towards women and to school children to help them prepare for these encounters. Uh,
Yeah.
so this is one of the Majan watchtowers to watch the wild animals at night, cutting of the grass, and then the women. And Nepali women are built very differently. The men and the women, like they have this amazing strength that I don't. I mean, I don't even know how they carry this load and climb up and down all the hilly slopes that they do there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there has been a lot of research with Sherpas, and they do actually have a genetic mutation that enables them to breathe very thin air and generate, energy and oxygen in the bloodstream from that. But yeah, it's a great moment for Doma Padel as well. Yeah, definitely will try and get her on the show and listen to her passion, because this will take this, as Meghna said, this takes immense passion to actually not villainize the species after you've lost someone personal, to an attack. I know I definitely wouldn't be as big, and I wouldn't be able to maybe do it. But yeah, definitely hats off to her, and the team that is working towards saving these rhinos, and making sure the conflict results in any conflict results in a good outcome for both the human and the rhino.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, and there are actually a few more photos if you have seen me scrolling down. This is actually
Mm,
one of the rhinos and her calves in Chitwan National Park. Um, and these are some of the photos of people looking for crocodiles and other things in the river. Another woman who lost her son to a rhino attack. This is children in the village gathering the buffaloes for grazing,
mm.
and this is the Madi Valley where a lot of things have happened. The surprising thing also is that they're saying that these attacks with the animals or the human wildlife conflict does not happen deep inside the forest. When they go deep inside the forest to collect wood and everything, nothing bothers them. But it's only the
Mm.
fringes. It's at the fringes, so that means that there's some kind of provocation or attack or something that's happening with the animals, because they don't have a problem with the humans entering inside deep inside the forest, but the humans are having a problem with them entering the fringes.
Yeah, I think it's mostly that the you know how you go when you go to a new place, you are agitated, and the slightest thing would bother you. So I think it's the same with these animals, where they are in a new place, in a completely foreign land, and even the slightest of the some twig hitting or something, some slightest of the movements, it would get them agitated, because they're already on their defense mechanism, and they are trying to survive in this new and navigate this new land. So I think it's a mix of that. In the deeper forest, the animals are at home and at peace, and they know this is their place. And generally, they are much less agitated to begin with. Um, you know, I propose that is a big reason there, um, of these sort of fringe attacks. But I think with proper education and proper learning to look for those behavior, look for those changes in the behaviors and taking appropriate action, I think that solves 90% of the problem. And it has been proven in areas with human animal conflict in multiple occasions in India, across India as well.
That is absolutely true, and I think that is what needs to be done. I also wanted to share one last picture from
Hmm.
the story, but I don't know why humans do this. But that is a woman standing in front of a rhino as people film on the side, and that is a
Yeah.
wild rhino. And I do not know why she thinks that is a good idea. This is also probably primarily one of the reasons that how Oops said, obviously they are on their highest defense alert, but then they have to come across that stupid humans that are literally out there in front of them to film something, which probably agitates them more. And then if there is an attack, then they would say, oh, the rhino attacked the woman instead of the woman agitated the rhino.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that could be that, or this could be, I don't know if this is her stepping in front of the rhino, or is it oh yeah, it says in the caption that perhaps unaware that rhinos, not tigers, are the deadliest animals to human in Chitwan National Park area. um
Yeah, so
yeah.
that is I think one of the biggest problems with human wildlife conflict, that um we and I think not just human wildlife conflict, I think in general social media has become so hazardous to our living that we would rather take the risk of coming in front of a rhino and dying than be aware that okay, this is a wild animal, I need to give it its space.
Yeah. Yeah. Very yeah, very viral culture. The viral culture has eaten up our empathies and sort of the slightest human decencies. But anyway, I think we discussed, as we discussed, like the um Doma Podel is trying, and with her colleagues, I think, to do that education bit that is very important, so that these kinds of coming in front of a rhinoceros doesn't occur. And it's a wild animal. You treat it as a wild animal. There is mutual respect and things like that. Um,
And yeah,
yeah,
and I think that, I mean, I hope that there's something similar that can actually happen in Colombia as well with the hippos. If someone like Doma can step up there and actually educate and try to find a way to coexist rather than killing.
yeah, yeah. That would be excellent. That would be an excellent outcome. But speaking of that, well, I'll do a small story as a change. Now, this comes from BBC again. This says nature corridor to be established across London. So, East London's wild cities, and this is again an example of where the wildlife and human line has been blurred, and Europe has to be the prime example, because Europe has been under sort of, it has gone through the industrial revolution, and it has gone through much of urbanization, where to the point where wild spaces are few and far between. So a lot of the wildlife actually thrive in the cities in across Europe, especially here in London as well. But anyway, East London's Wild Cities project creates a 14-mile nature corridor running from Lee Valley Regional Park to the Thames across the four boroughs. It targets nature deprived communities. The aim is boosting biodiversity by reconnecting isolated wildlife and pollinators. Green infrastructure also cools cities, supports food systems, and restores local biodiversity. Using a stepping stone connectivity model, habitat patches within 300 meters restore ecosystems landscape wide. A coalition of ecologists, growers, and the residents transforms urban spaces like gardens and rooftops into wildlife hubs. This supports the Mayor of London's strategy for resilient ecosystems benefiting people and wildlife. I think good initiative again on the topic of sort of human wildlife coexistence and human wildlife thriving in the same place. London can be a good example of that. Um, Again, very heavily urbanized, but um, still there's a lot of wildlife, including some rare wildlife that thrives there. We had talked about hedgehog highways in one of the previous episodes, and we did a short on it as well. So projects like this is the way to go, because there's no way actually to retract the human population and actually um, you know um, make spaces for those wildlife exclusively. So these kinds of solutions is what needs to be looked out for. There's a beautiful series recently released called Secret Garden from BBC, and it sort of goes through the different parts of the UK and highlights how wildlife is thriving in the gardens and on the fringes of human habitation. Um, yeah, beautiful
Yeah,
story there.
and I think it's a great way, because if you are going to start with making these nature corridors, then you're teaching the children also, how to protect and how to be
Mm-hmm.
compassionate and how to actually value environment, because most kids today that grow up in the city are not even aware of the environment or nature or even connected to it. So nature corridor is a good starting point, because this corridor might also bring back the pollinators, so bring back more bees, bring back more flowers, bring back more wildlife. So this is a great starting point, and in all cities I think we need this, because cities are the first place where you don't see nature at all.
Mm. And I think you mentioned a point there that I feel like it's a important point, is that when you encounter wildlife, you're not having that encounter from a place of fear or a place of self preservation, but you're encountering having that encounter from a place of conservation and from a place of mutual respect and from a place of giving each other some space. You're not startled by it, but you'd rather um, you know respect it and give it its space and then carry on doing your own business. Those kinds of um, I guess those kinds of encounters can only happen if you have the proper education, you're armed with all the different behavioral things that an animal can exhibit, and that's the only way you can have those positive encounters, overall positive encounters. Because Chitwan National Park, I've been there. There are walking tours inside Chitwan National Park, and you
There are,
can
yes.
encounter tigers in those walking tours. And the tigers are 30 to 50 feet away from you. So, you can have those encounters without agitating either party or without the harm of either party. So, it is possible, but it just needs that education and patience, I guess.
Yeah, and the thing is that like in this article, I think it says that research found that London is 1 to 1.5 degrees hotter than the surrounding southeast region, and nature networks could cool urban areas by up to 7 degrees Celsius. And this is something that I think we're missing in a lot of cities. I remember a friend of mine once said, "Oh, why couldn't we just have like AC or an air conditioner that could just blanket the entire city?" And someone in the comments, and someone in the comments wrote, yes, that's what trees are for. So yeah, I think we very easily forget, because even when it's a really sunny day and it's really hot and you stand under the shade, you can like automatically see like a 5 to 7 degree difference. And
Mhm.
that is why you need nature, because if you don't have nature, you don't have trees, you don't have the wildlife, it's not possible for us to survive.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool.
Okay.
Do you want to do like a smaller story and then we can go back to the main ones?
Yes, sure. I'll do a smaller story. Um, So, World Earth Day 2026, which was just recently, how
Mhm.
community led environmental initiatives are making a change in Ernakulam, Kerala. This is an article from the Hindu. Environmental organizations and individuals in Ernakulam are driving significant change through years of consistent ground level work, focusing on making conservation a way of life. Their diverse efforts range from crucial mangrove conservation to creating vital data banks through meticulous documentation, all while actively engaging students and local communities. A prime example is Grassroot, an organization based in Vipin, Nayara Rambalam, which has dedicated itself to mangrove conservation since its establishment in 2021. Manoj Kumar IB, a member of Grassroot, articulates their philosophy. They view themselves not as activists, but as locals genuinely committed to preserving their environment. This collective commitment underscores the potential for profound environmental impacts when communities stand united for nature. Their ongoing initiatives demonstrate how sustained local action fosters tangible positive outcomes, transforming environmental stewardship into an ingrained practice within the region's communities. So this is great how community-led initiatives are. And this is, I think, something we've spoken about in a lot of episodes, where these community-led initiatives are what are actually making the biggest difference in conservation. uh, and
Absolutely.
and not just in India, like in Africa and different places. But I mean, I think it's especially Africa and Southeast Asia because here the communities need to bind together. Also in South America, like these are where
Mhm.
the stories come from, where like community led initiatives are making a change.
Yeah. There's a good point here in this story that I found very interesting is that you know these kind of local local people, the grassroots people, the you know the environmental impact they can have when communities stand united for nature. I think it will all start with the local people in a specific region where the conflict is happening, or where there is a threat to the wildlife, or there is a big corporation trying to take over some forest land and things like that. There's always the locals that are the first line of defense against those any of those happenings. So I think these local communities and local and we have covered, I think, many a story like this where local communities have raised their voice against something nefarious or bad going on in their community regarding the nature. And I think the locals are genuinely, especially in these areas bordering, wildlife and bordering forests, locals are very in tune with nature, more than like people like us who are just living in the urban spaces. So this is a great initiative, and I think again a model that could be replicated elsewhere as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing from this article is that they're actually doing mangrove restoration projects. And in a lot of places that they're cutting down the mangroves. And anyone who knows how the mangroves work, they're like they're in the tides just before the oceans are hitting the land. And they have really deep roots and they're home to a lot of wildlife, and they're the reasons that the land is not being eroded or not being and it's being protected from the ocean just because of these mangroves. So if you take off the mangroves, you're actually completely changing the ecosystem.
Mm, mm. That is true. That is very very true, and I think it it um
Yeah.
eh, yeah.
And I think I'll just share like a few photos from the article. Just give me a second. So this is actually um, this was the flooding that happened, and this is the tidal flooding that happens in the area. This is the person Manoj Kumar IB with student volunteers during a mangrove plantation drive. So they have little mangrove saplings in their hand. And then they have other kinds of creative intervention where they have these photography contests to get people to get out in nature, click photos. They have entries coming up from all over the world, and then there are people like Sriman Narayan who are actively making bird feeders and actually providing water to birds from over 13 years. And he's already distributed over 30,000 pots across 11 districts in Kerala this year.
Mm.
And these are children that are actually measuring the rain gauge and seeing how much rain is you know happening this year and how to compare it, so you know how real climate change is when you're mapping it for yourself. So great small initiatives that are being taken on a
That
community
is
level.
beautiful. That is beautiful, actually. And like we have talked about this before as well. Like, um, influencing the young minds is a great way to ensure that the next generation actually has more compassion than us towards the environment. Um, beautiful, beautiful story, beautiful little story. We'll move on to the next one, and I think there's a lot of positive stories this week that we have managed to collect. But this one comes from the Guardian as well, and again a UK rewilding project, a story about the UK, one of the UK's rewilding projects. So. This is headline: More than 15 million oysters to be released in the North Sea for UK rewilding project. Over 15 million juvenile oysters are being released into the North Sea as part of a significant UK rewilding initiative centered in Orkney. This ambitious project, spearheaded by Green Britain, Britain Green Britain Foundation, and supported by several marine organizations, aims to restore extensive oyster beds. Experts anticipate this will trigger a trophic cascade, benefiting not only fish and the local bay, but also marine mammals, seabirds, and entire ecosystem. The scheme's unique rearing process is intended to serve as a template for reviving oyster population and damaged marine ecosystem across UK and Europe. Historically, vast oyster beds were a vital part of UK's coastal environment, but overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction led to their dramatic decline. This reintroduction hopes to reverse that trend, contributing to carbon sequestration and overall marine health. I think, again, a great initiative there. And we have talked about, I think, a lot about like how each part of the ecosystem plays a very important role in maintaining the balance in those particular ecosystems. Here, oysters, as an example, they're not the apex predators here, but they are the ones that all of the other apex predators sort of depend on for their food sources, or you know, seabirds or mammals or marine fish and things like that. So this term trophic cascade is a term increasingly being used in conservation, where we're trying to find you know find solutions which would have these kinds of trophic cascades, where bringing back the natural uh, you know animals that fill that niche in that particular ecosystem, bringing them back can cause this unthinkable effect across the ecosystem, which is this is an awesome thing to witness.
Absolutely. And it's actually a little ironic as well at the same time that historically the oyster beds were a part of UK's coastal environment, but overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction led to their dramatic decline, as it says in the article. So we were the cause for them going away, and now we will
Mhm.
be the reason that they probably might be back. So it's like a cycle always, like, where humans destruct and then they try to construct. So this is one of those classic examples, and I think this is one of the ways that Oops was saying that we're trying to bring back things. Like, so last time also I think he had spoken about the horses. This time also he had spoken about
Mhm.
the horses, and it's not just the horses, but different. I think projects happening elsewhere as well with the bees, with the
Mhm.
insect that we spoke about last week. So that insect as well. So this might actually have really good impacts, but this is something that we need to do on a bigger level. So when we say that we need to
Mhm.
bring back nature, this is what we need to be doing. So rather than again focusing on economy and profits and pollution and habitat degradation, this something like this, like 15 million oysters, yeah, that could be life changing.
Yes, yes, and I think, as highlighted in the article, this can serve as a model for other, maybe coastal communities, and or like the, marine ecosystems, where these kinds of, one when one species is removed from the ecosystem, it can have a catastrophic effect. It's all about studying that ecosystem very closely, having having a very deep understanding of that ecosystem, and trying to identify the species that would, bring about the most change, and are not trying to introduce species, I guess. We have done that a couple of times before. We're not trying to introduce species that don't belong there, or that can that won't be able to fill the niche that was left void by, the degradation of other species there.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about this is also that they're saying that there will be carbon sequestration that would
Mm.
happen because they would introduce the oysters. And they're saying that the potentially it could sequester up to 76 tons of carbon dioxide every year. So
Wow.
that is a crazy good amount of carbon sequestration that would be done once 15 million oysters are being introduced. And once these are introduced, and if they are potentially thriving, then probably they would be introduced to other areas. And slowly, like, like UK and how Singapore banned the dolphins, as we spoke about last week.
Mhm.
If things like this keep happening, I think we might actually have a chance at saving this planet if we keep doing better and better things for nature.
Yeah, yeah. I do believe that, there are, and I think our podcast, the message that we put out into the world, is also us trying to play a small part in that. Very negligible, but I think we are there too. With all the conservationists and the frontline, the grassroots workers that are actually, shedding their blood, sweat, and tears to, achieve these rewilding goals. And I think this is not easy. This is something that is not easy. I can imagine them be having to go through countless hoops of the government, or red tape, or like, funding not being available to them, nobody willing to fund these kinds of expeditions. I can almost imagine them going through all those challenges and difficulties, and still coming out, so strong at the end of it. So, um, yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing to witness, and we'll follow this story definitely. Something, if there is an update of some kind, or if there is sort of follow up on the story, which I'm sure there will be sometime.
Yeah. And we will know if the oysters are thriving, and if they have actually started implementing this elsewhere as well.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that would be super cool. Um,
Okay, then moving on to the next story. We have a story about the coral reefs. And this is a news from Mongabe. It says one of the world's largest deep sea coral reefs discovered off Argentina. Scientists have
Mm.
identified a potentially massive cold water coral reef system discovered deep within Argentinian waters. Located approximately 1,000 meters below the surface, this extensive reef is dominated by the rare Bathelia candida coral and supports a vibrant ecosystem, including numerous species previously unknown to science. Researchers aboard the RV Falca explored a 900-kilometer stretch, finding evidence that suggests the reef could be one of the largest globally. However, the discovery also brought concerns as signs of human impact, such as fishing debris and potential trawling damage, were observed. Scientists are also worried that the area might become a target for future oil and gas exploration, raising urgent questions about its protection. Firstly, amazing. Secondly, trawling impact all the way down to 1,000 meters. That's crazy.
Yeah, like it's like they never stop. Like you give them an inch and they take a mile, but this is like give them an inch, they will take everything. Um, like where is this? Where does this end? I have no idea. Like where does this end? Does this end at all? Like you know, um, I have no idea, and it's very yeah, I don't know, it's very difficult to come across these kinds of stories where on one side there is these group of conservationists and you know grassroots workers that are trying to revive and restore an ecosystem by releasing so many oysters and trying to do good by us by sequestering that many amount of carbon and things like that, that many tons of carbon, which is a great deal in itself. But at the other end there is these companies where you know they're going deeper and deeper because they're not finding fish on the surface. um
Yeah, but
there
I mean,
is a
imagine the
global
lines and how deep they go in. Because if
yeah
they're impacting I mean, a reef 1,000 meters below the surface, um, it's actually not healthy. I mean, this should be a wake up call for most governments that stop the trolling. I'm also going to be just sharing a few pictures from the article. Um,
mm,
right. Yes, so this is just a general picture. It's a octopus with her eggs, and she's sheltering the eggs behind the corals.
mm-hmm,
Um, this is actually artificial corals being planted on that reef down there. They're installing a substrate to provide a surface for the cold water coral larvae to attach themselves and to grow, and this might potentially help to propagate the reef. So this is an artificial coral that they're doing mechanically underwater. These are those reef forming corals called the Bathelia candida. And you can see like fish underwater. So they cover hundreds of meters of a submarine canyon wall on the Patagonian continental margin. So this is the entire reef and how it looks. And these are photos from the expedition. So this is actually a skate that is interacting with the artificial coral, which is quite cool because the artificial corals are being then accepted by the wildlife that's growing there. um,
mm,
and then these are the different species that they saw. So they documented sport lobsters, glass square, brittle stars, and an array of other species. um, this is a deep sea echinoderm known as a basket star. How beautiful is that?
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, and this is a rare phantom jellyfish that was sighted in the deep sea. As you can see, it can produce its own light. This is a very deep sea creature, which is why it needs to produce its own light. These are the expeditions that were led, and the ROV that was used underwater to explore the deep sea. And
mm,
this is the environmental DNA sampling to know what biodiversity stays in the ecosystem. Yeah.
mm, mm. Um, yeah. Again, like we definitely don't want to lose any of them. We definitely want to inherit the next generation with a world where you know these species are thriving. These species are you know well and good. um, we definitely want such a world for the next generation as well. So I think I feel like we are at that point where we have to take a very strong decision for ourselves, that do we want to keep doing that? Do we want to keep doing this for eternity? And I can understand um, there is a demand, right? There's a demand that these trawlers and these companies are serving, but either a line needs to be drawn, or there there needs to be a better solution to everything. Um,
Yeah.
I
I,
sincerely believe that.
I think, like, when we come across these kind of discoveries like this deep sea reef, and I mean, mostly people assume that coral reefs are in the shallow waters and they're in tropical waters. So this is in the cold waters and it's deep. So there's a lot about the ocean that we've still not discovered, and there's a lot about the ocean that we will probably never discover, just because we
Hmm.
cannot reach there and it is too deep and it is unknown. But the ocean is what is keeping us alive. Like 50% of the carbon is absorbed there, and it produces more than 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. So we need to be more respectful of the ocean, because that is where, like, I mean, if we have life, we have it because of the ocean. It's not just the forest, but the ocean as well. And sometimes I'm scared of that, when you have these kind of discoveries, obviously it opens up the human pathway for, oh my god, there's so much more to protect and there's such amazing species. But at the same time, I feel like we also have newer places to plunder. That, oh, there's this deep sea reef, so why don't we go and do these experiments or do this kind of stuff. Every discovery always, I feel like, has a pro and a con to it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that is the case. And I I sincerely believe that there is so much that the world will be able to take, and I think there are scientists and researchers working on solutions, and we are not the experts. Obviously, we are here to share the news and highlight these issues. We are not the experts here. We if any of you remember, we had talked to an expert dealing with corals and how they are sort of changing their chemical structures, etc. But there's only so much that can be done. I'm sure definitely there are I guess scientists and conservationists that are working towards getting solving these specific problems regarding trawling, or regarding the supply of fresh fish to global markets. I'm sure there's a solution out there. It just needs to be implemented, and it just these companies just need to listen to those solutions. They might be a little bit more costly, but at the not at the expense of the entire world.
Yeah, I hope that there are such discoveries that do come across, but I hope that such discoveries would lead to more protection and more stricter laws, and are good for the ocean. It's great that we're doing some artificial coral plantation there, and hopefully the reef would bounce back from the environmental damage that has been noticed there. But at the same time, the damage cannot be completely stopped till industrial trawling and other impacts that we're causing has been stopped. So let's keep discovering, but let's keep protecting.
Right. That's a beautiful, beautiful message there. Um, do we have anything else? Oh, yeah, there is another story. This is coming from Manga Bay. This is a short story as well. Black cockatoo species caught in the crosshairs of global race for minerals. Okay, this sounds very interesting. So the Australian government has granted Alcoa a national interest exemption, allowing continued bauxite mining in the northern Jarrah forest despite unauthorized clearing. The forest is vital habitat for threatened black cockatoo species, including critically endangered Baudine's black cockatoo. Environmental groups criticize the Australian dollar 55 million payment, and conservation programs are the 55 million Australian dollars payment and conservation programs as insufficient. Since 1836, extensive clearing has occurred for mining. The recent agreement mandates Alcoa implement environmental rectification, including offsets and cockatoo conservation programs. However, organizations like BirdLife of Western Australia argue these measures won't prevent the Baudine's black cockatoo extinction, as it relies on the forest for sustenance. I think this is such an age-old story as well. The the prophets coming before the betterment of the you know wildlife living there. And just look at this cockatoo, such a beautiful looking bird. I'm just in awe of this bird. Such a beauty, such a beauty. And look at the habitat as well. Like, it's such a beautiful habitat. Like, why would you want to destroy this habitat? Oh, such a beautiful bird. So you can see how it thrives and survives on this forest. Such a beautiful, the northern Jarrah forest. This is the northern Jarrah forest, and this is the the Baudine's black cockatoo. So yeah, I think just giving some payment and doing like a report is not enough. Um, there needs to be more that needs to be done there.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that a lot of these conservation programs, like here, obviously they are saying that Alcoa will be given this money. Alcoa is giving them this money so that they can continue the bauxite mining.
Hmm.
Firstly, obviously, there's unauthorized clearing. Secondly, there is mining, and now the problem is that government is trying to like kind of like just push it under the mat. So they're saying let's just implement environmental rectification, which is just an offset. So do a cockatoo conservation program. So like maybe run a small breeding program and run it in a small make a small experience center or make a small zoo or whatever you would call it, and then from there you would show that you're actually conserving the cockatoos while you're not actually conserving them. And which is why organizations like BirdLife Western Australia are arguing that these measures are not enough, because the black cockatoo needs the forest. So, you cannot cut down the forest and say that you can offset it by some other conservation actions or some other conservation programs.
Yeah, and I'll just share my screen with the map that would make things much clearer for anybody, for the people that are watching. So this is the mining area. The red, the dark red, and the solid red is the mining area up to March 2026. Now, the light gray or blue, whatever you choose to call it, is the northern Jara forest. That's the national park boundaries, I believe. And the bird's territory in this striped blue or bluish green area, the oval, that sort of exactly overlaps that mining area. And now look at the concession area that Alcoa's mining has gotten. Look at it almost expands all of the northern Jara forest. It's like it's encompassing everything there. It's a huge area there, and that's exactly the area where the autumn winter migration for these birds, the Bodine's black cockatoos, happen. So this is the primary winter habitat of these Bodine's black cockatoos. So without this, and this habitat is entirely will be engulfed by this concession area if this goes forward, which means these cockatoos will have no place to go and no forest to thrive on in the winter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is a map that actually shows how alarming it can be. Which right now there is some area where it can still survive in, but if the concession actually goes through, that means the entire area that it uses as a winter habitat is gone.
Mm,
There is nothing. And I mean, even if you're going to have any xyz conservation program in a closed setup, in a captive setup, that will not emulate the forest. And that is actually really far. I mean, this is what we were talking about, that we need to give back to the environment instead of taking from it. It is
mm,
clear that this mining is a bad exercise for something that is endangered, such as the Bodine's black cockatoo, and still the government is choosing to prioritize the mining over
mm.
the survival of the Bodine's black cockatoo.
Yeah. The cockatoo has a huge range here. The light blue borders, that's the cockatoo's range. But and the closest big city in the biggest city of Western Australia, I guess, is Perth. So Perth is nearby. And I think, yeah, this is their winter habitat. And if this happens, as Meghna said, yeah, it will be catastrophe for these birds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mining that was allowed till at least this March was still okay, in the sense that there was a huge amount of habitat that was still accessible to the birds. But with the
Mm,
new permissions or the
yeah,
new mining
it
spaces,
just
then
covers the entire thing, as you can see in the map. Yeah, it just covers the entire thing,
yeah, and
and
I don't even know why they're calling it a concession area. Like it's not a concession for the birds. It's yeah,
it's a
I
concession for the profit earning, like corporations.
yeah,
Yeah.
and surprisingly, I mean, you would think that Australia has so much wildlife, it would want to protect it. Last week we did the story about how they stopped the water in New South Wales, and
Hmm.
it led to a lot of muddy, parched turtles. And now we're
Hmm.
seeing this where they're not caring about the black cockatoo. Australia, I honestly thought you were better than this.
Yeah.
Like that, you cared about your environment, you cared about your indigenous different species.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a unique ecosystem, such a unique number of species in Australia, and I think every one of those species are iconic. That are found in Australia. But yeah, if this is the state, like, again, who in the right mind would make this decision, having all the maps and having the data with them, that this expansion would just mean that the entire habitat is just engulfed in this mining project. And even if the birds do come there, because this habitat has been their home for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, and they're following those migratory patterns that are almost embedded in their genetics. And even if they will show up there, but all the dust and all the commotion caused by the mining would mean a very painful end to their lives, which yeah, it just gives me the chills thinking about it even.
Yeah, that is true. I hope and I really hope that the Australian government can see better than profits and can actually save and protect their endangered Bodine's black cockatoo.
Mm, mm,
Yeah. Um, but I think we can only hope. But we will keep you updated if there is any
mhm.
positive update on the story. Sadly, this episode will have to end on this sad story. But hopefully, we have a positive update on it sometime in the
Yeah,
future.
true.
Yeah, so we as we draw the close to this episode, then it's time for my message. We heard about the nature corridors being established in London and the world day, the community initiatives in Kerala. On an individual level, what are you doing for the nature, for environment, for animals? It could be as simple as using a soggy paper straw, but it could be something as big as going and volunteering with either plantation drives or animals and in their shelters, or it could even be something as big as going out and actually being a scientist and on the field and we would love to hear all your stories. We would love to get more people on board or as guests here. So if there's something that you feel like you're contributing to the environment, we would love to know in what small ways you're contributing.
That's a very interesting thing that I would love to know about as well. But as always, definitely subscribe to our channel. It helps out a lot with the reach, and that is the only goal that we have here. There's no ulterior motive other than reaching as many people as possible with this message. Again, nobody, everybody doesn't have to agree with this message, but they must hear out our message because that is the need of the hour. We are also on all the major social media platforms, so go follow us there. We go live on all the platforms all at once, so you'll be able to catch us wherever you follow us. If you like this video, give this video a thumbs up and share it with your close friends and family. If you're listening to a recorded version of this episode, do consider giving us a rating. Again, that helps with the reach, which is the need of the hour and which is the crucial thing. That is our mission statement, basically, to put it simply. And yeah, share this episode with someone who shares or agrees with you on these particular topics, or share it with someone who does not agree and they just to give them a different perspective of looking at things. But other than that, that's it for today, and we will see you next Sunday. Same time, same channel. Have a good one, guys.
Bye bye.